Space culture has baked into the local culture here.
Completely baked in. There's military secrets, family secrets. When you're sitting in these bars, you don't know who's next to you. A doctor, a lawyer, an Indian chief, an astronaut.
Do you really think that we went to the moon to collect moon rocks?
Do you remember when Challenger blew up?
We could see pieces falling into the ocean all afternoon.
And that happened right here outside of Cape Canaveral.
Now, something else happened in Cocoa Beach.
Nuclear-powered submarine base.
That's right, Trident missiles. You can see out there the launch towers of Blue Origin.
They're going to leave Florida, and then they're going to have to catch it in probably 12 hours.
The astronauts and potentially the engineers are the stars here in this area.
The astronauts for sure. Cruise ships, the Coast Guard, SpaceX.
This facility is huge.
We can always unite through space. There's something about humanity getting together and getting behind this and just going on the adventure.
All right, here we are, downtown Cocoa Beach.
You're in the middle of the Space Coast.
And you guys, you're from here. You grew up here.
Yeah, grew up
Jack
here.
and Greg. It's my first time here, so I'm excited to learn from you guys.
The history of Cocoa Beach is not a long history. It was originally developed in the 1920s by a lawyer from Georgia named Gus Edwards, who built a bridge out here, and it went from the mainland back 20 miles behind us to the sand here on Cocoa Beach on the beach. He built a casino, divided the property up into lots and put in a grid. The problem was, of course, the Depression. The plans he had for Cocoa Beach kind of cratered. And Cocoa Beach stayed a small fishing village all the way through the 40s. During the wartime, there was an Air Force base down south where they were training people how to fly seaplanes. So this was all kind of off limits during the war. A lot of submarine action and U-boat action occurred offshore, a bunch of sunken boats.
Okay.
And it was the route of the Spaniards with their gold. So from Sebastian Inlet, 20, 30 miles to the south, all the way to the Cape, there's a string of sunken Spanish galleons and Spanish gold. But Cocoa Beach was pretty much nothing until they decided to put the missile test range here.
U.S. Navy or Army? Or?
Well, back then, there was a special agency that had taken prisoner or guest, I don't know what, Werner von Braun and his crew from Germany, and they decided they needed to start a missile program.
Okay.
So this became the test range for a lot of reasons. One, when rockets go up, they always go east, and there's nothing east of here. So if they blew up, which they often did, no harm, no foul.
They always go east because of the spin of the Earth, right?
Either east or north, yeah, but ultimately east. And there's a string of islands, the Bahama chain, and even past the Bahama, there's a string of islands. And back then, they had to set up observation posts on all those islands to watch the missiles. It was called the Eastern Test Range, Tracking Range. And so this was the perfect place to start a missile program. And so during the late 50s, Cocoa Beach started to get some of these engineers and scientists coming. And if you read the book, The Right Stuff, Tom Wolfe kind of analyzes what happened, but it was a kind of crappy beach with a bunch of crappy beach houses and now a bunch of young engineers coming. And then when Kennedy said we're going to the moon in 10 years, everything changed. All the engineers, all the scientists, everybody came here. So Cocoa Beach in 1960 probably had 500 people, and in 1965 had 12,000 people. And Cocoa Beach became the epicenter of the world. And now here it is, 70 years later almost, and you can see out there the launch towers of Blue Origin.
Okay, out in the ocean.
Yeah. The
way out
tower's
there.
way out there.
And the big players right now are SpaceX, Blue Origin, and NASA, right? Fair to say? And we'll get into that today.
Yeah, you'll get to see that.
But those are the big three.
Right now. They always say surfing when you get to the beach, oh, you should have been here yesterday. It was really good. Well, you should have been here yesterday. There was a beautiful launch last night and one tomorrow. It's almost like living by an airport now.
Beautiful launch. Don't they all look the same to some degree?
No, everyone's different.
The best part of them is the return to pad when the sonic booms hit. and they land the first stage out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we leave this area, there's something we have to see.
Well, yeah, no, we're in the epicenter of the Bermuda Triangle.
That's what they call it.
Bermuda.
Yeah, Bermuda Triangle.
Just so you know, this is the last beach you can drink alcohol on the beach in Florida. So all the spring breakers
haven.
are coming here.
Okay. So you can't tell the Space Coast story without showing this scene. Huh?
Oh no, there's 30 bars within 3 blocks. When you're sitting in these bars, you don't know who's next to you. It could be a doctor, a lawyer, an Indian chief, an astronaut. It could be any. Oh, it's you! How are you? Gosh, it's so good to see you. I fall in love with you more every time I see your posting. How are you?
Good.
You look terrific. You never get any older.
Oh, no.
It's true, honest, it's true.
I don't know about that.
This guy's doing a podcast. We're showing
We're doing
him
a video about Space Coast.
Awesome.
Do you meet many astronauts, engineers? Those? No. No. All right.
She wouldn't
you killed
tell
the story.
you.
You
She
killed the
wouldn't
story.
tell you if she did.
Right?
She wouldn't tell you. In the 1950s, all of a sudden, engineers from every college, every university, everywhere, big city are coming here. And so it turned into a Las Vegas type strip. There were clubs and restaurants all up and down this strip. And my dad had a bar right there on this corner called the Missile. It was the first adult entertainment. They didn't call it that then. But the original astronauts all hung out in there except for one. John Glenn never showed his face.
They'd hang out at the strip club.
Right. At this place was Bernard's Surf. It was a community restaurant slash bank slash hangout from the 40s until the 60s. By the 60s, it was the epicenter of Cocoa Beach. And you see, it's gone now. And that's the story of Cocoa Beach. Everything that was here is getting transformed. This is a brand new building. That's a brand new building. The new City Hall. Everything is starting up again, which is a result of the ebb and flow of the space industry. Cocoa Beach went crazy in the early 60s. Engineers and all the associated businesses that come with educated, young, partying people with a mission to go to the moon. We never saw our parents. They were all busy sending people to the moon and related to it in one way or the other. And then Nixon ended the Apollo program. 10 years of glory, and now it's 1970. The engineers and everything that came with them left. The unemployment rate in 1970 here was almost 20%. Everybody left.
Okay.
The businesses closed. The engineers left. Houses were in foreclosure. It was as bad as it could get, and the population went from all 30-somethings to all retired people. Retired military that heard about this Patrick Air Force Base, where they had a commissary and a hospital, live in Cocoa Beach in houses that were only 5 or 10 years old, picked up for nothing. Then they decided to do this space shuttle thing, reusable airplanes stuck on solid rocket boosters with a big old gas tank.
That was the 80s.
That
right?
was the 80s. And again, it boomed. All the engineers, all the businesses, everything went crazy again until the first explosion. When Challenger blew up, it all stopped again. And then when they fixed it, they fixed
1986, right?
They fixed the O-rings, they did all that stuff. Then it started back up again, but everybody knew that the shuttle was going to end, and then what? Nobody knew. And so the economy and everything of Cocoa Beach goes up and down with the rocket business until they figured out what was going on and decided tourism and the port and cruise ships might help. Bob Salmon! Jack Kirschenbaum!
Greg Galzerano. I know you.
Give me some knuckles, doggy. How are you?
Good.
Oh, man.
Did you get that junk food bakery?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that place.
They got lots of cookies and
The donuts, I'm a donut guy.
they don't have donuts except on Fridays and Saturdays.
Okay, I'll remember that. We gotta run, I don't wanna run over your toes.
Who's that?
He was a local surveyor.
He was the smartest, brightest surveyor ever, and then he had a medical issue. And now he's retired, eats cookies. Now, something else happened in Cocoa Beach. California and the surfing craze in Gidget hit Cocoa Beach in the early 60s. And Cocoa Beach, Florida has two things. Weather all year that's nice,
Yeah.
and the best surf, most consistent, on the east coast of Florida. And it's produced a number of champions, including a guy named Kelly Slater.
Right.
Kelly Slater grew up here, traveled the world, became the 11-time world champ, and this is a statue dedicated to Kelly. Now, the surf industry became a huge economic driver in Cocoa Beach.
I'm gonna run out there. You can
Yep.
stay here. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
The mic will pick you up.
So Kelly still resides here, as well as in Hawaii and other places. But Kelly and his two brothers became local heroes, world heroes, because of Kelly's accomplishments. And he still surfs. He was surfing the Pipeline event just a couple weeks ago.
Beautiful statue. That is so cool. I think Jack is still talking. He's great. I pressed play and he hasn't stopped for 1 second.
He's dressed in Christmas attire, and surfing Santas is another event we can talk about. But surfing became a giant, giant thing in Cocoa Beach. And a guy named Ron DeMina was selling surfboards in New Jersey, at Ship Bottom, New Jersey, and he decided he needed to expand. So he took a trip down the East Coast selling surfboards, and when he came across the bridges to Cocoa Beach, he said, "Oh my God, this looks like home." And so he opened a small shop called Ron John's, which is now the biggest surf shop in the world with a dozen locations. And
It keeps going, Ron John.
yeah. Now I'm going to take you by another baked-in attribute. I Dream of Jeannie is a 1960s sitcom starring Barbara Eden, where she is a genie and her master is an astronaut, Tony. It's great if you haven't seen it.
So space culture has baked into the local culture here. Fair to say?
Completely baked in. In the olden days, there was a hotel right back there called the Cape Colony Inn. It's gone, but the original 7 astronauts all got a piece of it. The developer decided he would give the astronauts a piece of the action, and that was the end of being able to use your space fame as an economic tool.
So the astronauts and potentially the engineers are the stars here in this area.
The astronauts for sure. Now, that was before there were 1,000 astronauts. When there were 7 astronauts or 12 or 30, everybody knew them by name.
When they'd show up at a shop, they got a lot of respect, a lot of admiration. Famous people.
There was a group of girls called the Cape Cookies, whose goal was to sleep with all 7 of the original astronauts. They were called the Cape Cookies.
Were they successful?
There's a book out called The Cape Cookies, and it's probably based on a true story. Like what I'm telling you, this is all based on a true story. If someone else tells it, I'm sure it'll be different. But I don't think they got all 7, and somebody's going to have to get.
Who was the
book and read it.
holdout?
I'm not at liberty to discuss that.
Okay. So are there a lot of not liberty to discuss topics here in this area?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Now
for sure.
there is, too.
There's all kinds. There's military secrets, family secrets. There's alcohol and drug secrets. There's, like any small town, this is a small town. It used to be called either Mayberry by the Sea or Mayberry on LSD. You just never knew. In the 70s, it was the 60s and 70s, it was as wild as any place you could be.
You've never lived anywhere else?
You know, I had 2 regrets in my life. One was I didn't eat the live scorpions in Beijing, but I have since eaten them in Bangkok, and I didn't get to live in a big city when I was young. Now, that regret I'll never be able to cure. But I grew up here, went away to school, and came back here to work. So me and my family have been here since 1958.
What was your work?
Which is a pretty long time. I was a lawyer.
Okay.
I was a lawyer. Now, this was the first public park in Cocoa Beach, Alan Shepard Park. He, of course, was the first American in space. Even the schools are named after stuff like that, like Freedom 7 and the like.
I went to Grissom High School. It was Ed White, Grissom, and Chaffee. And they all three died in a capsule in a test stand out here. They burned up inside the capsule.
Do you remember when Challenger blew up?
I watched it. I mean, I watched the pieces hit the ocean all afternoon. My office was on the 5th floor of a building in downtown Cocoa Beach, right on the ocean. And I had glass walls on the north and on the east. I invited everybody in my staff into my office to watch it. And as it was ascending, I said I would give up all of you and all of this to be there. And at that moment, it exploded. And those of us that knew exactly what happened. There was a catastrophic failure. We saw the solid boosters cross in the sky. They were no longer attached. We could see pieces falling into the ocean all afternoon. It was just
All afternoon.
devastating. Well, it was going up at tens of thousands of miles an hour. So after it exploded, it continued to ascend, and pieces. I mean, look at the videos. I can't look at them, but it was horrific.
And that happened right here outside of Cape Canaveral.
It happened right out there, just to the right, yeah. This happens to be the Cocoa Beach Pier. When they decided to build the Saturn missile, they built it on Merritt Island, which is the backside of the Cape. They had no way to get the pieces built in Huntsville there.
Oh yeah, I made a video about Huntsville too.
They had to dig a ditch, and on both sides of it, it was military, but the port they dug created an erosion problem for all the beaches to the south. We had to sue the Corps of Engineers to get them to promise to renourish the beach. Every 7 years, they do what they're doing there. That's the Beach Renourishment Project.
Okay, so this pipe going through here?
Yeah.
We sued the Army Corps of Engineers in 1990 and settled in 2000. Took a decade. It was the first and only time the Army Corps of Engineers ever settled a case for a renourishment project.
So when you sue the Army Corps of Engineers, you basically sue the government, right?
Yep.
Shut me up where you want to, but in a way you're suing the taxpayers, right?
We all contribute to the betterment of our country in some way.
Thank you.
If they build a road and they take your house to build their road, you are compensated for what they took. It's in the Constitution. When they took our oceanfront land because of erosion they caused, the court determined that was a compensable taking, and they had to pay for it. So instead of paying the billions and billions of dollars of damages, they agreed to do a renourishment program. And if you look down here, you can see how they're extending the beach.
Yeah.
When we started the lawsuit, there was no beach. The tide at high tide went all the way up to the vegetation.
This is probably the coolest pier I've ever seen.
You see that, those towers there?
Yep.
Greg, fill him in on what he's got.
That's Blue Origin. And that's their new $1 billion pad.
Blue Origin way up there.
Yes.
Okay.
Built it in a year. It went up really fast, and they've got the rockets usually inside the building. Tall towers are lightning arresters around it. You have the water tower that floods the pad when the rockets go off.
I wouldn't have thought Blue Origin is a big player here, but it is.
Oh, no, they're huge.
You hear about SpaceX all the time.
Blue Origin has a longer range plan, heavier, fewer rockets, as opposed to lots of little teeny satellites.
Spring break.
Yep.
The drinking starts early.
Yeah.
Oh,
see?
here we go.
This is I Dream of Jeannie,
Oh, okay, there she
Kelly
is.
Slater,
So basically everything you've talked about today
the
is in this
pier,
poster.
John Glenn, the surf contest. That's Friendship 7, climbing in.
So did those two groups blend it all, the surfing and the space communities?
Everybody was surfing and their parents worked for space. It was all part of the deal. And at the same time, this area of Florida stayed relatively economical because a day at Disney costs what, $500? A day here costs $10 parking. So
okay,
you can
you're
do it
saying
all.
it's not super expensive here?
Super inexpensive.
Okay. Oh, and we have a book here on the floor. The city of Cocoa Beach, the first 60 years. I feel like it's better listening to you, Jack, than reading that.
Okay, so why is it inexpensive here?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
If you look at Florida, the southeast Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, were where all the money went. And then the beaches around the big cities became the expensive beaches. We're not close to a big city.
Orlando's big, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's an hour away.
For example, one of these homes, cool, modest, mid-century, 50s home. How much are one of those, do you think, around here? And
500.
that close to the beach?
Yep.
500, 400.
Now we consider that outrageously high.
Wow.
Now, all of a sudden, a friend of mine who was in the travel business in the early 70s hooked up with a Norwegian guy, and they said Port Canaveral is the furthest north a cruise ship can be and get to Nassau overnight. And so they started a cruise line called Premier. And they had 2 or 3 boats they called the Big Red Boat. And they then did a deal with Disney that Mickey would make appearances on their boat. This is 30 years ago. And all of a sudden everybody said, hey, gee, this cruise business can be unbelievable. Ultimately, Disney bought them. And now the Disney cruises out of here are like the most popular cruises in the world. And that's where the boosters that Elon Musk sends into space land. They come back here. And it's where all the big parts of the rockets that they have to assemble at the Kennedy Space Center come in on barges. And it remains a fishing port, and it is a huge recreational port. This is a super secret Trident nuclear powered submarine base. That bay right there,
Okay,
That's-
nuclear powered submarine base.
that's right, Trident missiles. Now, Cocoa Beach High School is called the Minutemen. That's their mascot. Minutemen was the original intercontinental ballistic missile that was developed in the 60s to combat the Soviet threat. And they tested them here at Cape Canaveral, hence the Cocoa Beach Minutemen. Had nothing to do with the Revolutionary War.
Okay, do you know much about our nuclear sub industry, whatever you want to call it,
No.
arsenal?
No, but I can tell you it's called NOTU.
No two.
Navy Ordnance Test Unit. And if you Google that, you'll find out all you want to know about that.
How many subs, do you know? Roughly?
Well, even the British and the French subs come in here. They don't stay here. They come and go. This isn't like Kings Bay in Georgia where they build them and arm them.
Okay.
They come here and replenish. I think that could be a Navy sub tug, isn't it?
Sub tug.
When they come in here, they need tugs.
All I know is when they launch a missile out of here, 15 minutes it'll be to Africa. And it probably has enough nuclear warheads to destroy every city along the way.
Now, I grew up here during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Did you
How
ever
was
hear
that? Of course.
Okay, well, I grew up here during that crisis, and every day we had drills. We had to pick up our desks, take them to the front of the room, and crawl underneath our frickin'
So you think a
desks.
desk helps you out with a
No, but
nuclear
they'd
strike?
find us all together.
All right.
They'd vaporize us all together.
It's great infrastructure for
In
fishing.
the port today? Yeah. Haven't seen any?
Lost some turtles.
Yeah, lots of turtles.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's mating season for the turtles. Here's a good shot of that dredge.
Oh yeah.
They dredge the bottom over there.
Okay.
They pipe a slurry of water and sand to the beach, and it comes down that pipe. The water drains into the ocean. The sand is left behind, and it increases the size of the beach about 100 yards.
Okay, so we get 2-3 more minutes of Jack. Jack, anything else you want to say? Because we're going to go up to Titusville, meet up with the Space Coast reporter up there, Greg Pallone.
Yes.
The other Greg. What else do you have to say? What else can you tell us
I
about
think
your...
the most important thing is in a short-term history like Cocoa Beach of a 20, 30, 40-year arc you have to always look at the context in which the minute is occurring, because things change a lot quick, and the changes are really significant if you pay attention.
What do you think about this current iteration?
I think the jury is out. I think that these Airbnbs can decimate the neighborhoods and therefore the public schools, and then it will no longer be a community of families and kids. It'll become primarily a tourist area, which would be a bad thing. The jury's out. I'm not exactly sure where it's all headed.
How about with the space industry?
I think with
What's
the
your take
space
on that?
industry is going to bring a lot of high-paying jobs here. It's going to bring more people, but Cocoa Beach and Cape Canaveral are pretty much built out. With the height limitations in place and the density limitations, it's hard to get more population in those two places. And so
the values are going to go up.
the values are going to continue to increase, and that with the additional pressure of the Airbnbs, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens to the neighborhoods. Those are some of the cruise ships.
This is wild.
The cranes straight ahead with the red and white,
Yeah.
those are the cranes that lift the boosters out.
Okay, so the
SpaceX.
the ships bring the boosters in, and then the cranes lift them out.
Yeah, and they have a barge. It's an autonomous barge. They tow it offshore, and it goes by itself. No captain, nothing in it other than it just automatically goes to a spot, sits and waits for the rocket to come down on it.
More
Okay.
proof we're living in a simulation, and the machines are going to take over.
We're in a simulation, Jack?
Right this minute.
Fair to say?
No question.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. Another universe.
They're peeking through the atmosphere, so
We're
they're
in
laughing
some.
at us.
We're in some alien's Game Boy.
Yeah.
Okay, get up by the fence.
All right.
On your left is a restaurant that's been here 100 years. And then you get the cruise terminal, and then the cruise ships,
Yep.
and then across you get the Coast Guard, Blue Origin, SpaceX, Comex, Industrial Products, and the jetties and the port and parks and more restaurants.
That is
and as
wild.
you said, down at the end there, we have Trident Submarine Base. This port is everything to everybody. And what the port's trying to do now is chase out all the restaurants and bars and make all of this cruise terminals, including the marinas, which are just on the other side of this restaurant.
How do the locals feel? Or
Oh,
depends who you
they're
talk to.
pissed.
They're pissed.
They're pissed.
All right, Jack.
Here's your stop.
Thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
Your wealth of knowledge.
You're welcome. Good to meet you.
Appreciate it.
Good luck.
Loved it. All right, guys, we are off to Titusville. Greg Pallone, Space Coast reporter.
Channel 13.
Channel 13 is going to bring us through all the nuts and bolts mechanics of what's going on up here. And here's our Uber.
This is called Veterans Memorial Park, but it's all bigger part of Space View Park, which is this area. You got the Mercury 7 monument right there.
So you had a big launch last night, right?
They tried to launch. They had a technical problem, so they had to scrub it. So
Oh.
this is a crude launch.
Are we in your? Were we in your way?
No.
Don't want to edge you out with the GoPro. Okay, so this is the place to report from.
Yeah, this is a great view.
So
Big
I'll
crowds
go in with
gathering.
my great telephoto and show you what's going on out there. So a lot of reporting out here for this. Obviously, people are interested.
There's so much interest. You know, it's ironic. This park right here. I was here. It was right around 2011. That's when the shuttle program. You know, obviously they retired the shuttle program, and came out here and I was just going to talk to people and see what they thought. And I ran into this guy from Indiana, and I said, "What are you doing down here?" He said, "Well, I'm visiting. I love the Florida and that type of thing." He said, "I would love to see a launch." I said, "Well, they're not flying anymore. You know, the shuttles aren't flying. People aren't flying." And I said, "Would you come if it was just a regular rocket launch?" He said, "Probably not." He wants to see people. He wants to see our people going to space.
Okay.
And I always equate it to kind of like Daytona. What if the race cars were robotic? There weren't people in there. There's always a danger. There's always a
Right.
thrill to knowing that our people are on board these incredibly powerful rockets and these capsules that are going up to space. So
Launching right out of here. So that landmass right across from us?
that's the Kennedy Space Center. You've got, obviously the big building there is the Vehicle Assembly Building, or as Greg knows, the VAB. It's been here since the early 60s when they were starting up the Apollo program.
Is that NASA now?
It's NASA. It's always been NASA. But basically, this is the landscape of the launch pads out here, pretty much. You've got pad 39B all the way to the left. That's
Okay.
what they call now a clean pad, where they can bring the mobile launcher out there and bring any type of rocket out there, which they're going to be doing here soon. I think people see launches, especially crewed launches and human launches going up to, you know, on missions to space. I think they see it as something that they'll never be able to do. And so they're kind of dreaming about it and seeing it in reality through their eyes. So that's why they really relate to these astronauts. I mean, most of these astronauts just have very interesting stories. And it's not just the NASA astronauts, it's the ones from, you know, from Russia, Japan. We're all partners. And that's why they have the International Space Station, because it's a partnership between all these countries.
I'll have my wife zoom up on that as much as we can. But watch your work to see the real stuff.
There you go. Oh,
There we
there,
go.
oh,
Yeah, there we go.
You smarty.
Old school.
Smarty.
Okay, so for those that don't know much about the Space Coast, I've learned pretty much everything I know today in the last couple hours. Or the industry, you hear of SpaceX, right?
Right.
You hear of NASA, that's not what it was. And then you hear Blue Origin. What's the breakdown? What's going on here exactly for those that don't know?
The way it kind of went down is in the 2000s, basically George W. Bush pretty much said, sorry, shuttle program, we're not going to fund you anymore. We need to shut it down and move on. So at that point, NASA had to decide what they were going to do. So that's really when the advent of commercial space really came on, roughly in around 2007, 2009. Shuttle program retired in 2011, so there was a gap.
Okay.
But that's when Elon really got going with SpaceX and started launching his original Falcon rockets. And of course, a lot of them blew up. I mean, it's a test. You got new things, new technology.
So he just saw a gap in the market, like here's an opening and I'm gonna jump in and fill the void.
Basically, it was around, I think he started around
20, right?
Was it? Well, I think he actually started around 2002. 2002. And they started launching basically around 2010, 2011, and that's when that gap was, when the shuttle program had shut down.
Okay.
So he saw that window. And so what NASA decided was, they decided that instead of building, which they are building now, but instead of building rockets, why don't we rely on these commercial companies to fly what we need to fly? When it comes to like satellites, or when it comes to like deep space missions, or whatever, maybe eventually flying our people to the International Space Station. So essentially, NASA became a customer of these commercial companies.
How did those feel at NASA, those engineers at NASA who had their careers with NASA? Did they jump over? Or?
Some did if they were young enough.
Okay.
Many retired. There were layoffs. There were massive layoffs on the shuttle program. But understand that even the shuttle program dealt with contractors. They had a main contractor, and they would have announce every couple of weeks, you know, a few more hundred layoffs. They were cutting away as the program was going away, and essentially moving toward a more leaner way of dealing with the commercial space companies so that they could do the work for them. And then later, NASA has been developing their Artemis program to go back to the moon. We have not sent people to the moon since 1972, and that was the Apollo program. So now that NASA has a new mission to send our astronauts back to the moon to essentially colonize the moon, get a moon base, and that'll essentially be a jumping off point for missions to Mars or deep space. You have to bring everything with you. So right now, just now, there's actually 2 lunar rovers that are on the moon that were launched by private companies that are trying to map out the moon and seek out water, any type of water. Water is extremely heavy. It's heavy, you can't launch it. It's really tough.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so you have to, where you go, you need to find that water source. It's not just for drinking and living, but also they can use the hydrogen in it for fuel. So it's very interesting.
I'm going to be asking some very rookie questions.
You go, man.
But there's actually water on the moon.
Well, they think there are signs of liquid ice, but they think it's on the southern pole, which never sees the sun. So they need to go explore those craters and see if they can find them in there. Because if they can find water, then they're set.
Okay, and now this program NASA is operating now, that's in motion right now?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, in the vehicle assembly building right now, they have their heavy lift rocket partially stacked up.
Okay, so NASA is doing more than I thought. And then you have SpaceX, which we all see for
Correct.
the most part, right?
Yep.
The rockets coming back down into the tweezers.
The chopsticks. they call
Chopsticks,
them.
okay.
Chopsticks.
Chopsticks. And so,
That's eventually going to happen here.
Right there.
okay, that's
Right there.
going to happen
They're
there.
going to launch from here.
And that's happening in Texas right now.
It's happening in Texas. That's where their test facility is, but their primary launch is going to be out there at Pad 39A.
And then Blue Origin, what are they doing?
They've been flying their New Glenn. Morning, afternoon. Their New Glenn out in Texas, you know, the ones that they flew Shatner on and all the people who are paying. Well, their New Shepard, they just launched. I'm sure you watch it from the beach, Greg. Their New Shepard, that's their heavy lift rocket. They just did a test and flew that just a couple of months ago. And that's from their pad out there.
All that.
And it's incredible. Yeah. It's incredible. That's the first time that they've flown that rocket. So they're on their way at least. They're really good at building rockets. Now they need to fly them. They did their first test flight, deemed it a success. So many more upcoming, and hopefully they can get a cadence like SpaceX. SpaceX is launching all the time.
Okay, so are they all three in just fierce competition with one another?
I would say there is a healthy competition. SpaceX is obviously leading the way, but Bezos is definitely interested, and he's got the will and the capital to be able to do it.
Right.
And so yeah, they compete for contracts with NASA and other customers.
Is it just a fight for engineers? They're just bad, you know,
There's a demand. There's a big
Huge demand?
yes. Big demand, yes. And these are high-paying technical jobs. If you think about it, at the very height of the shuttle program, there were some 20-something thousand federal workers for
Living
the
out
shuttle
here.
program. Yeah.
living in Cocoa Beach.
Living on the beach, living here in Titusville. Titusville was very big. When the shuttle program shut down, this town took a big hit.
And so Titusville now, come back?
Yeah, big comeback. Big comeback.
And then we have what's going on here? Gemini, Titan booster.
Yeah, well, this is the Gemini program. This was the very first rocket program for NASA that flew in the late 50s and early 60s. They were flying the first astronauts. These are contractors. If you see Martin Company, General Dynamics,
Oh, yeah.
Aerojet, General Electric, that's a familiar name, Lockheed. These are familiar companies that worked and made the Gemini program possible. Mercury, it was Mercury first, then Gemini, and then Apollo.
So, Greg, what's your fascination with space and doing this coverage?
There's just something about exploration, you know, finding the unknown, going to do something that we've never done. That to me is just so interesting. And I just, this area, this place, the Space Center, you know, this is my Graceland. This is my Disney. Other people like those places. This is, I just feel so at home. I remember back in 2007 when I saw, you know, just an ad for this job. You're going to cover Brevard County. I said, where's Brevard County in Florida? I don't know where that is. Then I looked and I said, oh, well, it's Cape Canaveral. Oh, it's Cocoa Beach. Oh, it's the Kennedy Space Center. And then I read further and it said, you will be covering shuttle launches. And I raised my hand as high as I could and said, sign me up, because that just sounded incredible to me. To be part of my beat, to be space.
Where'd you come from?
From Georgia. There's just so much stuff. I mean, there's space all around. I mean, if you look at the names of the streets, you've got Astronaut Boulevard. This is Gus Grissom. This is the Gemini 3, Gus Grissom and John Young. And the name of the capsule to Molly Brown. They flew in March of 1965. John Young was the commander of the very first space shuttle mission, STS-1.
And I went to Grissom High School.
And you went to Grissom.
This is your Hollywood Boulevard.
This is Hollywood Boulevard right here. This is great.
The Space Coast.
Yeah, this is awesome.
And you were saying off camera, talking to the engineers or anyone working in the industry is pretty much impossible.
Yep.
NDAs and
secret stuff.
They have technology they don't want to reveal. This is actually Spaceview Park. You can see the sign.
you gotta love the Florida element here.
Yeah.
With the alligators.
Always have to have the gator warnings.
Okay.
But yeah, these are all the names of the engineers and the different people who've worked on these programs. Here's Harrison Smith. That's his handprints. He flew on Apollo 17.
How about our space industry versus anything international? Are we leading everything right now, or
By
down.
leaps and bounds.
hands down?
Elon's
The-
90% of all the rockets going into space are from Elon.
Yep.
And then 5% is China, and the other 5% is
Russia.
whatever. Yeah. But
Well, SpaceX's cadence is they're launching all the Starlink satellites so they can provide all this internet service in places
Sure.
that can't get it in other parts of the world.
President
JFK.
Kennedy, nice.
Yep. Most famous phrases
Yeah.
in mankind ever. And I thought it interesting. He was giving this speech at Rice in Houston, and he pronounced decade. I always thought that was interesting. Is that the way you're supposed to pronounce it, decade, or is it
I've
decade?
never heard that.
If you listen to it again, he says it.
Well, he had that accent, right?
He did have that
Boston
that kind of
accent.
Massachusetts.
Right.
But yeah, this guy, he's the one who set us
So
on the way.
this is when it was the competition between the U.S. and the Soviets.
Yes, Cold War.
And the Soviets had us in some ways. They
Yeah.
put the first woman up there. They put the first dog up there.
First satellite too. Was
First
Sputnik.
space station was them, right?
Yeah.
Mir was Soviet.
Yeah.
And they had it was all about like that game, right? To whoever was winning space, in a way, it was a metaphor for winning. It was like sports, right? You're sort of winning the battle on Earth.
We were in the Cold War.
Yeah.
And what's the ultimate military high ground? Space.
Yeah.
And Congressman Bill Posey, who I know you know, Greg, he's from this area. He just recently retired, but when I first met him and I got here, he worked for NASA back in the 70s in the Apollo program. And one of the first things he said to me, he goes, "Do you really think that we went to the moon to collect moon rocks?" And I kind of thought about it. And then he said, "Yeah, it's the military high ground."
Yeah.
It is. And that's why the conquest for low Earth orbit, for the moon and further, that's where the power comes from. Do you know the Russians built a space shuttle?
They built the space shuttle?
They built a space shuttle.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It never flew.
Why not?
They didn't have the money. They ran out of money because of their economy and everything. That's why the Soviet Union collapsed.
Their base is in Kazakhstan, I believe.
Yeah, that's where they fly their Soyuz rockets. And we have an exchange program with the Russians, the United States and them, is that they, back in 2022, they came into an agreement that they would alternate NASA astronauts and cosmonauts on either Soyuz rocket flying from Russia or our rockets flying from here to go to the space station. So it's been a partnership. Despite the political...
Is it still a partnership? Seriously?
There's one flying tomorrow. Would have been, yeah. There's a cosmonaut. Yep.
With us tomorrow.
He's over there right now.
Yep.
He's over there right now.
The guy from Japan.
Yeah, and we have a Japanese astronaut.
Then 2 female pilots.
The commander and the pilot. Yeah,
Yep.
I like that. No matter what the geopolitical situation is,
yeah.
you know,
That's
that
what space
falls.
unites people.
These guys have tiny hands.
Yeah, astronauts are usually not very big.
How tall are they usually?
I'd say probably about my height. I mean, there's not too many tall ones because if you think about it, especially in the old days, you're trying to fit in one of those capsules, you know, and you're putting 3 of them in there. Think about when you're watching Apollo 13 and everything, how squeezed in that tin can they are. So
They all had to be pretty skinny.
yeah, well, yeah, oh yeah, fit everything. Yeah, big.
So
time.
what's going on with the guys up there now, right? Isn't that what the next launch is for, to get them out?
Yeah.
Well,
Rescue
let's
them
be
out?
real careful here. I don't like to use those terms. You know, the original launch for the Boeing Starliner was a test. It was a test flight. Did they expect that they would be there for 9 months as opposed to 8 days? No, but they rolled with the punches. You had 2 astronauts who said, hey, we'll make the most of the time. They end up doing a lot more experiments. They end up doing a spacewalk, and they celebrated the holidays and all that. So they made the most of it. But what they did was Boeing Starliner capsule, NASA deemed it was not safe to bring them back on it, so they brought it back unmanned. And then they decided to go ahead and get SpaceX and their Crew Dragon and make them a part of the Crew 9 mission. So they flew 2 astronauts up.
Okay.
And now they're going to bring those 2 back on the Crew 9. And once the Crew 10, which was supposed to launch last night, hopefully will launch tomorrow night. Once they get up there and get settled, they'll switch off, and then they'll bring them back, hopefully Sunday.
9 months.
9 months.
Is that the record?
No.
What's the record?
A year.
A year.
But that was planned. That was on purpose.
Okay. So have they been in contact with the media, those astronauts up there?
They've had some availability.
Okay.
They've done a few things like that. Have they been asked those questions? Yes, they have, but they've been very diplomatic about it.
Okay.
There are those who want to sensationalize it and say, you know, they were stranded and it was a rescue, but that's just not the case. I mean, they had some issues. That's what they do. That's why they test for the next time, so it doesn't happen again. Engineers will tell you all day long they want things to go wrong so that they can address them and not have people on board and run that risk. So things happen.
Yep.
Space is hard. So that's why you have the 2 companies. You have Boeing and SpaceX.
So there are 4 big players.
Well, more or less, you have SpaceX, you have Boeing, and you have Blue Origin, and also you have a group that's been around for a long time called United Launch Alliance, ULA. They're flying a brand new Vulcan rocket. I know that sounds like Star Trek, but they're going to be flying that Vulcan rocket and doing missions as well.
And it's on the upswing right now, right?
Yeah.
What's going on out here? Mm-hmm. The cycle went down, and now it's really charging.
If they have their way, the possibility of 300 launches a year.
And what was it 5 years ago?
Couple. We've had 20 so far this year. 20 launches so far, and we're in March.
March 13th.
Yeah, and
Yep.
if they get to a point, it's going to be like an airport. If you think about it, they're just going to bring a rocket out, launch it, bring another one out, launch it.
And more launches here happen than in Texas or California,
Way
right?
more.
Way more. Okay.
A lot more.
Rapid and reusable.
And that's the key right there, reusability. And that's what SpaceX really got on the cutting edge, and
Yeah.
bringing their boosters back, catching it with the chopstick, or landing it on a drone ship,
Yeah.
or landing it on the landing zone, which will happen tomorrow night with the sonic boom coming back. They
nice.
just get that thing, they refurbish it like a used car, and they get it all ready to go and put it on another rocket and go. It doesn't matter what we're going through, in the country when it comes to division or whatever it may be. No matter who you voted for, or no matter who we can always unite through space. I mean, there's something about humanity getting together and getting behind this and just going on the adventure. I mean, it's just
Right.
one of those things that, I mean, if you think about back in the Apollo program, landing on the moon, just the whole world was so excited, not just because, I mean, yeah, it was America, it was the United States, but people all around the world were so excited for that, because it brings that moment. We all bleed red, and it's one of those things that they may not understand the technology behind it, but they just know that people are leaving Earth and they're exploring. And I think everyone, at least a little bit inside, is an explorer. So
Everyone inside is an explorer, and this is the embodiment of that.
this is a way we can go on that journey with them.
I love it. All right, Greg, thanks for your time.
You got it, man.
You didn't have to do this. Thanks your wife.
I have to thank my wife. She's a big fan of yours, brother.
Okay, well, I appreciate that because
So how about a shout out to Katie?
Katie, shout out to Katie. Thank you, Katie, for bringing us Greg today. Oh, great. And this is sort of like a overview of what's going on here.
Right.
You're the expert, the specialist. How do people find your work and your reporting?
Well, we're Spectrum News 13. We're one of 30, about 30 stations across the country. We do have YouTube. You just search News 13 Orlando. Part of our website is devoted to our space coverage. We have
Okay.
upcoming launches.
Cool.
We have launch coverage, all the details about the missions and everything. So everything's right there. We put a lot of stuff on YouTube as well.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so we can't drive by SpaceX because it's far from the road.
Yeah.
But this is Blue Origin.
Yes, manufacturing facility. They're manufacturing the rockets inside these buildings.
Okay, the rockets are in there. We saw the launch pads from super far away.
Yes.
Earlier.
They're competing with the big rocket. And then I know that Jeff Bezos had ideas to build like O'Neill colonies in outer space and all that stuff. They also got a lunar lander that they're got under contract with NASA.
This facility is huge.
Oh yeah, and they're very fast and quick in building. Well, I haven't been out here in 6 months. The cranes are new, the parking garage is new. There's probably 4 or 5 new buildings, that have come up or come out of the ground. So that's how fast they're building.
Wow. Oh, this is cool. So tourists can just come down.
Oh yeah,
and-
this is it. Yeah.
Kennedy Space Center.
Visitors complex for tourists. You can come walk through the rocket garden and look at an IMAX film and
So this just fills up with tourists from
all around the world.
all around the world,
Yeah.
huh? Okay, we were just gonna go in to get some shots near those rockets, but look at that, Greg, $160
Wow.
for 2 tickets. That's wild. I mean,
You want
we
to go
can,
into outer space?
we can get the shot. We
Yeah,
can
there
get
you
the
go.
shot over there.
Yeah.
But that is wild. Imagine taking a family of 5. I mean, it must be awesome. I am.
Wait, how many subscribers do you have?
I got like 15 subscribers. I'm gonna get 17 this weekend.
Actually?
17
Yo, can I say what's up to
subscribers.
the camera? Yeah, can we
Do
Yo,
it.
what's up?
What's up?
What's up,
Do
guys?
you guys like YouTube?
Yes, sir.
Subscribe. I'm gonna have 18 subscribers.
Yes, sir. I got you.
What's the channel? What's the channel?
Peter Santenello.
Are we gonna be in your video
Oh,
now?
yeah. What do you guys think of this place?
Yo, it's good. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Nice.
I got that.
Nice. See you guys. All right. This view will do for the closing shot, but first you wanted to show me something, Greg.
So this is the launch, landing, and deployment of a SpaceX rocket. It'll take off the pad, and then when it gets to stage separation, it flips around and fires its rockets and comes back into Earth orbit and lands on the drone ship or on land. So this is basically a
Drone ship.
yeah, they've got the barge offshore. So this is what's going to happen tomorrow. Well, when the astronauts go to catch the space station, They're going to leave Florida. The space station circling the Earth, it's just traveling around in a continuous orbit. They're going to take off and catch it. They're going to follow a ring like this.
Oh, that's
And then they're going to have to catch it in probably 12 hours. It's going to accelerate till it rendezvous with that space station.
How many times does it have to orbit the Earth to get to that?
I don't know exactly, but I mean, the thing's going, it's going to be going about 22,000 miles an hour to catch it.
The growth of our science and education will be enriched by new knowledge of our universe and environment, by new techniques of learning and mapping and observation.
All right, Greg, thank you for
Yeah,
this.
no problem.
I appreciate it because
Yeah.
you made this
Put it
happen.
together.
You put it together. You got Jack. Jack was a tough one to nail down,
Oh,
but he
yeah.
was great on camera.
100%.
And then Greg having
Yeah.
expertise and
Double
understanding.
G, triple G.
Double G, triple G, because you're Greg also. Very unique place, Space Coast, I will say.
Oh yeah.
Haven't seen anything
Nothing like it.
Yeah. All right, guys, thanks for coming on that journey. Until the next one.